He boarded the plane as a respected CEO, dressed in a sharp suit, ticket in hand for a first-class seat. But within minutes, that respect vanished. A flight attendant approached, eyes cold, and told him to move because someone else, someone more important, wanted his seat. Humiliation burned in front of an entire cabin watching in silence. He didn't fight back, at least not then. What happened next would shake the entire airline industry and cost them billions. How did one quiet act of defiance spark a storm no one saw coming? Marcus Grant wasn't just any passenger. At 42, he was the CEO of a thriving tech company, a man who had built his success from the ground up. Colleagues admired him, competitors respected him, and his family saw him as a quiet force, steady, disciplined, always prepared. This trip was supposed to be routine, a flight to finalize a major deal that could open doors for countless others who looked like him. Marcus arrived at the airport early, the way he always did. He breezed through security, nodded to a few admirers who recognized him, and settled into the first-class lounge to review his presentation. To anyone watching, he was the picture of confidence, focused, calm, untouchable. But beneath the calm surface, Marcus carried something heavier than his briefcase, the knowledge that no amount of success ever truly shields you. In boardrooms, he'd been second-guessed. In restaurants, he'd been mistaken for the help. Still, he believed progress was being made, slowly, painfully, but surely. As the boarding call echoed through the terminal, Marcus thought only about the deal ahead, unaware that this flight would have nothing to do with business and everything to do with dignity. What waited for him at 30,000 feet would test not just his patience, but his very belief in justice. The boarding gate felt routine until Marcus reached the front of the line. The agent scanned his ticket, hesitated, and frowned. "One moment, sir." She tapped a few keys on her screen, then waved him through with a tight smile. Marcus thought nothing of it. But as he walked toward his first-class seat, the flight crew's eyes followed him, not with recognition, but with something colder. He placed his briefcase in the overhead bin, settled into a seat, and exhaled. But before the cabin door even closed, a flight attendant approached. Her voice was polite, but her eyes were hard. "Sir, I'm going to need you to move to business class. This seat is needed for another passenger." Marcus looked at his ticket. First class, seat 2A. No mistake. "There must be some error," he said calmly. But the attendant didn't blink. "Sir, we'll need your cooperation." Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to listen. The man waiting in the aisle, a white passenger in an expensive watch, smirked. As Marcus gathered his things, every instinct told him to protest, to refuse. But a lifetime of knowing when to pick his battles whispered otherwise. He stood, his face expressionless, and moved to the back without a word. Only then did he hear whispers. Who does he think he is? Probably upgraded somehow. They're always playing the race card. Marcus stared at the seatbelt sign, forcing himself to breathe evenly. The humiliation didn't end there. Minutes later, a different attendant handed him a drink he didn't order, with an insincere smile, as if daring him to react. The man who'd taken his seat laughed loudly, calling for more champagne. And through it all, no one said a word. Not the passengers, not the crew. Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from his assistant. "Good luck on the deal. You've got this." He smiled faintly. They had no idea that at 30,000 feet, a deal of a very different kind was already being made. Not with contracts or signatures, but with quiet resolve. Because Marcus Grant wasn't just moving seats. He was taking mental notes. Every glare, every insult, every detail. And when he stepped off that plane, he wouldn't be the only one who remembered. But before the wheels even touched down, things would get worse. Much worse. The plane touched down, but the ordeal wasn't over. As passengers unbuckled, Marcus stayed seated, waiting for the crowd to clear. Then came the announcement. Calm, clipped, rehearsed. "Mr. Grant, please remain on board. Security will assist you." Confusion rippled through the cabin. A few passengers glanced back, curious, while others hurried off, eager to avoid involvement. Marcus felt the knot tighten in his chest. He hadn't argued, he hadn't raised his voice. Yet two uniformed officers stepped aboard as if they'd been waiting for him all along. "Sir, we've had a report of non-compliance during boarding," one officer said flatly. Marcus opened his mouth to respond,
She didn't storm back in immediately. She
"You
paused,
need to come
letting
with
the
us."
anger settle,
No
turning it
explanation,
into strategy.
no chance to speak.
Within minutes,
Just
her
an
phone was
unspoken
alive with
assumption
calls to
that
trusted
he was the
staff,
problem.
legal advisors,
Phones
and board
appeared,
members.
passengers recording,
Every message,
as Marcus
every
stood
command she
calmly,
sent
refusing
carried
to let his
authority,
anger show.
the kind that
But
reminded
inside,
everyone
the
she wasn't just a
humiliation
title
burned
on
hotter
paper.
than ever.
By the time
As
she
he walked
returned,
down the
the
jet bridge
atmosphere
flanked
inside
by
the hotel
security,
had
one
shifted.
thought rang
Whispers
louder.
turned to
This
uneasy
isn't about a
silence.
seat.
The staff
This
who
is
had
about
doubted her
power,
authority felt
about
the weight of
dignity.
their mistake.
Outside
She
the
walked
gate,
through the lobby with
reporters who
calm,
caught wind of the
controlled
incident
power,
began asking
each step
questions.
a statement.
A passenger
This was
shouted,
her
"He
space,
didn't do
her
anything."
empire,
But
and
the
she would
damage
not
was
be
done.
ignored.
Marcus
What
had been
happened
branded
next was
difficult,
decisive.
simply for
Policies were
existing in a
reviewed,
place someone
accountability
decided
was
he didn't
demanded.
belong.
The staff
What
responsible
no
for
one
the
knew,
humiliation
what the
were
airline didn't
confronted,
see coming,
and actions
was
were
that
taken
Marcus
that left
Grant
no
had the
doubt
resources, the
disrespect
influence,
and discrimination
the
would
resolve to
not be
fight
tolerated.
back. And
The
he wouldn't
hotel,
just clear
once a
his
stage
name.
for
He
injustice,
changed
became
the
a place
game
where
forever.
authority and respect
Marcus
were
Grant
reclaimed.
didn't just walk
But the
away
story
from that
didn't
plane.
end with her
He
personal
took
victory.
action.
It
Within
rippled
days,
outward,
his team
sparking
compiled
conversations
every
among
detail,
staff,
witness
guests,
accounts,
and industry
videos,
insiders
and
about
records of the
bias and
airline's
assumptions
mishandling.
that silently
What
shaped
had started
behavior.
as a
The
humiliating
incident became
personal
more than a
affront
personal
became a
affront.
battle for
It was a mirror
accountability.
reflecting
The story
systemic
went
issues
public,
that many
spreading
ignore
across
until
news
they see
outlets
them
and social
firsthand.
media,
She knew
exposing
that
the
one
airline's
story
systemic
couldn't change the
disregard for
world
dignity
overnight.
when race was
Yet, by
involved.
standing her ground,
The
by
airline initially
reclaiming what
tried
was
to
hers
downplay
with
the
dignity
incident,
and force,
issuing vague
she sent a
apologies.
message.
But
Injustice
Marcus
can be
didn't settle for
challenged,
words.
and the voice of
Legal
one
actions
person
followed,
can inspire
partnerships
reflection in many.
reevaluated, and
In the
internal
end, she returned
investigations
not
launched.
just as a
By the
CEO,
end,
but as
the
a
company
symbol of
faced
resilience and
consequences that would
accountability.
resonate for
The
years.
question
A
lingers long
staggering
after the story fades from
$4.2 billion
view.
in losses,
How often
not
do
just
we
in
underestimate
fines, but in
someone based
damaged
on appearance?
reputation,
And what
canceled
happens when we
contracts,
finally
and shaken
recognize the
trust?
truth?
One
Her
man's
experience
calm
reminds us
resolve
that
had turned
power
an
is
act of
not just about
discrimination
position.
into a
It's about
historic
presence,
reckoning.
courage,
For
and the
Marcus,
unwillingness to
experience left
accept
scars,
injustice silently.
reminders of a world
And maybe,
that still
just
judges
maybe,
people
it's a
not by
call for
merit
all
or
of us to
character,
examine the
but by
assumptions we
color of
make
their
every
skin.
day.
But it
Even
also
after she
reinforced a
reclaimed her
truth he'd
authority,
always
the
lived
echoes
by.
of that
Silence
humiliation
allows
lingered.
injustice
She
to
couldn't
thrive.
help but replay
Courage can
every
demand
moment in her
change,
mind.
and
The
one
doubt in the
person's
manager's
integrity
eyes,
can
the
ripple
coldness
far
of the
beyond
staff who had
themselves.
ignored her title,
This
the
wasn't just a
whispers from
story about a
guests who seemed to
CEO
see
or
her
a
not as a
first-class seat.
CEO, but as
It was a
someone who didn't
mirror held
belong.
up to society,
The anger she felt
reflecting
was
the
not
countless
just
moments,
personal.
small
It was a
and
reflection
large,
of the
where
countless
racial prejudice
microaggressions,
thrives quietly,
assumptions, and
unseen,
barriers she had faced
unchecked.
throughout her
And it
career.
asks a question
Every moment
each of
of
us must
disrespect
face.
she had endured
How often
surged
do we
back,
allow
sharp
such
and
injustice
vivid,
to go unnoticed,
reminding her that this incident
unchallenged,
was
and
not isolated.
unresolved?
It was systemic.
Marcus's choice to act,
Yet, even
to
in the
demand
face of anger,
accountability,
she held
reminds us
herself with
that dignity
control.
is
She
non-negotiable,
knew that reactions
and that
rooted purely
progress
in emotion
begins with
rarely
courage.
create change.
It's a story
Instead,
of pain,
she turned
yes,
every ounce
but
of that
also
fire
of
into
power.
decisive action.
The power to
Her
transform
phone buzzed again.
humiliation into
This
justice,
time, it wasn't just
and
board
personal
members.
indignity
It was
into a
employees who had
wake-up
witnessed
call
her
the
removal,
world can't
some
ignore.
apologetic, some
the question
shocked,
remains
some
for every
scared.
viewer.
They
If you
needed
saw
guidance,
injustice,
they needed
would you
clarity,
stay silent,
and most
or would you
importantly,
take a
they needed
stand?
to understand that the culture in this hotel would no longer tolerate discrimination, no matter how subtle. As she walked through the corridors of her hotel, she noticed the tension thick in the air. Staff avoided her gaze, guests watched in silent curiosity, and the hum of activity slowed. She paused near the concierge desk, her eyes meeting them, not with fury, but with a piercing, unwavering determination that demanded respect. She issued new directives, emphasizing accountability, training, and awareness. Every word, every gesture reinforced a simple truth. Authority cannot be questioned by prejudice, and dignity cannot be stripped away without consequence. The lessons extended beyond the walls of the hotel. Social media buzzed with stories from employees and guests who had witnessed the confrontation. Conversations sparked about racial bias, unconscious assumptions, and the weight of first impressions. People began to question their own behaviors and the invisible rules they enforced in their workplaces and communities. What had started as a personal affront became a catalyst for reflection and dialogue far beyond the hotel lobby. She returned to her office, letting the moment settle, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself a deep breath. This wasn't just a victory for her. It was a statement for anyone who had ever been dismissed or doubted because of their race or appearance. And while the path ahead remained long and the battles far from over, one truth was undeniable. Change begins when courage meets action, and when one person refuses to accept injustice silently. And as she looked out over the city skyline from her office, she silently asked the world, "How many times have we judged someone too quickly? And how long will it take before we truly see each other?"